Hello and welcome to this Story Behind the Story, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of your time and spending it right here with us on NAC TV. I'm Eoin Devereux, news reporter with the Banner Press, welcoming you as always to the program. And we are joined this week by publisher, owner, operator of the Banner Press, Ken Waddell. Ken, good to have you in there this week, so to share some of the details of the week that was.
Well, as they say at my age, it's good to be anywhere, Owen, so yeah, it's good to be here.
All right, let's start, as always, with the front page. This week's edition, we were able to get some information and some spectacular pictures on a unfortunate circumstance over the weekend, a barn fire that occurred on a storage shed just on the former hatcheries and chicken barns property, just on the edge of Neepawa there. We had several people send us updates on that and information on that. And Ken, you were able to track down some of the details on that and how it all played out.
Yeah, well, it was kind of an odd thing because it's a little bit isolated. I mean, it's right in town, but nobody really lives really close. And I don't think there was anybody at their place of businesses south of the property on a Saturday. And there's nothing west across the road from it. So it was quite a while before the fire got reported.
Right.
And in fact, Fire Chief Eve Gillis was kind of surprised when they got there at how consumed the building already was, because they got the call and they were there within minutes, of course, because they're only, well, I don't know if they're a quarter of a mile from the fire hall at that location there, maybe.
Right.
And so he said they're concerned when they hit the spot. He didn't know what was in the building.
Yeah.
And it could be a storage building, could be anything in there, but they determined that it was not dangerous goods, and they were able to put the fire down fairly quickly. All that was in it was some old egg cartons and stuff from the hatchery days and some paperwork and stuff, according to Eve. But he has a greater concern is that it definitely looks like a suspicious fire, and there was no electrical service to the building. There was no heating source in the building.
Yeah.
And so his concern there is if somebody is getting a thrill out of setting fires, he hopes that that's the only one.
That's right.
Not another one.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things of, and here, this is my 2 cents in, this is not the opinion of NACTV, not the opinion of the Neepawa Banner Press, and not the opinion of Ken Waddell. Maybe it's not your opinion as well. But again, maybe it should be. As Ken clearly explained there were no outside sources that could have caused it. There was no sudden strike of lightning that could have hit that out of nowhere as well. I know we've been having relatively mild weather for this time of year, but no mystery lightning passed through Neepawa on the weekend. So yeah, we can't say officially because investigation still needs to be done, due diligence and all that. But again, how else? And like you said, Ken, it's something that hopefully is not a trend.
No, for sure not. Yeah, the building wasn't used anymore, but it was the last building on the property there, I believe, of the former Neepawa food processors. Chicken barns were on the west side mostly, a couple on the east side. And this was part on the hatchery side of the street, and it's all closed down now. And as one picture shows there, even the remains of the fire are all cleaned up and scraped away.
Yeah.
And so I understand they're preparing that site for a possible seniors housing apartment. That's the story that we get. And we've been talking to the people, but it's been a while now since they were out seeking potential tenants for that, or possibly condo members for that particular site. So I guess this maybe helped them in a way because it cleaned up a building that was in the way. But I was thinking, if they'd wanted to get rid of it, and I don't think they had anything to do with the owners of the building, whoever they are now, because it may not have been owned by the property owners anymore. It could have sold pending moving. Mm-hmm. But if they wanted to clean it up, the fire department would probably like to have had a little more warning, because clean burns are generally a little more preparation than that.
That's right. Now, if you want to see, as well as being on the front page of this week's edition of the Banner Press, you can see clearer pictures as well on page 8 of this week's newspaper, inside the newspaper. So you can see, and we are very appreciative of the photos that were sent to us on that. Thank you very much. Very appreciative of Johnny on the spot, as it were, being there and being able to get these incredible pictures. Because I'll be honest with you, again, as you know, if you're a consistent listener and viewer of the show, I'm always, if anything, honest with you to a fault, probably my own fault. But we had nothing. Legitimately, visually, we had nothing else for the front page of this week's edition of the paper. We had some good news, some interesting news that is impactful for individuals in and around Neepawa, but that visual aspect, that little grabber that you need when it comes to a newspaper, we just didn't have it. So having said that, I didn't set the fire. I did not set the fire just so we'd have a cool front page. I assure you of that. So
yeah, we're supposed to report the news, not make the news.
Exactly. But if you want to find out a little bit more about what happened there, you can find it on page 1 of this week's edition of the Banner Press, and some additional pictures inside on page 8. Let's go into the words that are actually in there. One of the most notable stories we've got in this week's edition you can find on page 2 of the newspaper. And if you can't find a copy of the Banner Press, you'll be able to most likely learn about it by watching NAC TV, because they did record their annual general meeting. They've had it recently. They wanted to share some of the details of the year that was with the community. It was held over at Kinsman Courts 2, and they did share some details. It was kind of interesting. And Ken, you've got an inside track on some of the details as well, since you are actually the general manager for NAC TV. Well, maybe I should have passed the story to you, actually.
No, that's fine. I don't like writing about myself. Anyway, I still am general manager of the NAC TV. It's almost a nominal position with a small monthly stipend. But we've got such good staff at NAC TV now that they only check in with me once in a while, or I check in with them every day, how things are going. Keep an eye on the books and whatever, but NAC TV, as was noted at the AGM, certainly has grown. There's a big picture there of this in the paper of the staff and volunteers, and we do have a number of volunteers on the board and doing some of the video work. But we certainly could use more, because a far higher proportion of the video work is now being done by paid staff, which are much appreciated and they're very good. But if we could do more programming with volunteers, we wouldn't have to increase the staff complement anymore, which would help the bottom line of the business, of course. But anyway, it was a good meeting, chaired by Bill Sirik, and the financial statements were presented by Treasurer Karina Jasnik, and reports from Rain Pryor on the local journalism initiative part of the station. I gave a little report and encouraged people and thanked everybody for being involved, and it was a good meeting. KK2 is a great place to have a meeting. Great place. They have great snacks and beautiful setting in there. Everybody has 4 people to a table. You can sit, put your elbows on the table, read your papers, and visit. Acoustics are good, and it's a great place for a meeting.
What I found very interesting as I was watching, I was not able to attend. I was covering another event, I believe, in and around that same time. I don't remember what that event was, so I guess maybe it wasn't as important as I thought it was at the moment. But I watched the video, which was, of course, recorded by NAC TV. Check your local listings if you're interested in learning a little bit more, and find out when it will be broadcast on this station. And it was interesting to look at the numbers of the financials. Unfortunately, they dealt with a year-end loss. They had the revenue come in year over year at about $216,989. And there's some cents in there, but we didn't share that with you. No need to get into the pennies of it. But their total expenses was an increase of It was a total of $238,901. And I guess that was around a 17% bump year over year, Ken. That was interesting. What would you attribute that to in your estimation?
Well, the biggest cost for NAC TV is staff, because we have 5 or 6 staff now, whereas several years ago when I became manager of the station, we were dealing with one staff person basically and a few volunteers. Now we have 4 or 5 staff, and we still have a bunch of volunteers. So the staff costs money. Also, we do get money through the Local Journalism Initiative, a federal government program, to help news media, and so that is bumped up both the income and the expense side. And we do still get our not bonuses. Anyway, Canadian Broadcast Rights Association sends us
royalties.
Royalties.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, had a little senior moment there. Royalties from CBRA, and so overall, the budget I think in this last 7-8 years has probably increased 4 times.
Oh yeah, and most definitely. I was going through the archives, just sort of educating myself on years past for NACTV. There have been some very interesting NACTV AGMs over the years. This one was relatively smooth, but what really jumped out for me for this year was that number. As you heard, over $200,000 for expenses, over $200,000 for revenue. But I remember a time back in 16, 17, maybe 18, where the total revenue was only about 60, 70, 80,000, in and around there. The expansion and the growth and the development of NACTV over the last few years is extraordinary. But then you do, as you said, you do have to grow to account for that. And we don't want people to think that the hiring of staff is a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. The individuals that are a part of NACTV have put in their heart and their soul and their effort into it, and they've really done a tremendous job of branching out and expanding the product and expanding the brand that is NACTV.
Yeah, there's a far higher ratio. Sorry if I interrupted you.
No.
There's a far higher ratio now of new programming.
Yep.
We used to have a lot more reruns. We still have some. You can still watch Bonanza on NACTV.
Well, you got to know where your money's made. Now, Bonanza and the Beverly Hillbillies is where it's at. I got to tell you that much.
Anyway, but it's the amount of new programming has gone up considerably, and then we also switched a couple of years ago to, replicating the 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night program to going round the clock.
Right.
So that increased some of the money. It gave us some increase from increased royalties because we were on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week instead of just 12 hours a day.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about it, the Canadian Broadcasters Rights Agency, which does hand out royalties to stations such as NACTV. They had handed out roughly about $20,000 less to NACTV this year than they had last year. But there's very specific reasons behind it because of back pay. There was money that was owed to NACTV that they paid last year. And this year's number is a little more aligned with what they're going to be getting on a year-over-year basis, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. There was some of the member stations, and there aren't many. They're under the independent stations, or CACTUS as it's called, Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations. That's an acronym for you. But they put up a bit of a fuss and said, well, just a minute here, I think there's some royalties missing from a few years ago. And so the CBRA corrected their math, and so there was a bump last year, yeah.
Yeah. One positive, though, most definitely came from the Local Journalism Initiative. And the report shared some of the details on that. And it was extraordinary to see the amount of hours that have been developed through the LJI program there that are actually, you see right here on NACTV.
Yeah, LJI stands for Local Journalism Initiative, and I said earlier it's a federal government program. And they recognize that television stations, radio stations, and newspapers have dropped in number considerably over the years, and they need some support to keep going because the advertising isn't as big a portion of the budgets as it used to be. And so that's certainly something that NACTV wants to work on. We would like to have more advertising, and certainly it's deserved because the ratings were discussed at the meeting too. And it's hard to get exact ratings, but NAC TV is available on nearly 600,000 homes across Canada and Western Manitoba through Bell MTS and through WCG, Westman Communications Group. And it's available all the time online at nactv.tv. Very high ratings, extremely high ratings last year when the curling was on.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very high. It's amazing that NAC TV is in the top quarter of all the shows on Bell MTS. I can't imagine what those other 150 channels are doing if they're viewed less than it. I mean, not to downgrade what NAC TV does, but at any one time, there's three-quarters of stations at Bell MTS are watched less than NAC TV. It boggles my mind.
I'm sorry, I'm just going through my head right now, all the different stations. There's probably 4 or 5 baking stations, cooking channels and whatnot. 300 sports channels that keep showing the same 2 games each and every day at each and every same time. That's a little pet peeve of mine there. What else? Reality shows. You remember when the Learning Channel used to be about learning, Ken? We're old enough to remember when that was actually the mandate of the Learning Channel, as opposed to, cop shows and reality shows and whatnot. So,
well, I switched to Channel 2 the other night, PBS, for a few minutes, and it was Lawrence Welk, for crying out loud. Like, Lawrence Welk died when I was a kid. Honestly, Lawrence Welk has not been alive. I mean, it's still entertaining, but it's old-fashioned entertainment. Well, but they're running some shows that are 50 years old.
Well, again, I mean, sometimes you gotta know your audience there in public television. Because I remember growing up, public television, I used to watch every Sunday. I think it was around 10 a.m. because they'd show reruns of Monty Python's Flying Circus, and I loved that show growing up. Still enjoy it, although I've seen it so many times. And again, Lawrence, the little standbys like Lawrence Welk, as you said, Austin City Limits was another show. I think it's still on to this day.
Really?
Old episodes of Doctor Who, a lot of British stuff, know. But maybe that's what NAC TV needs to do. See if they can get the rights for Monty Python and Doctor Who and Lawrence Welk, Or no, this is it. This is what we're talking about. This is money in the bank for you right now, Ken. Get the rights to Tommy Hunter.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
That's guaranteed bank. That's guaranteed box office.
I'll ask Rain to look at that because there is public domain stuff out there. Would surprise you what is now public domain.
Yeah.
Maybe Tommy Hunter's public domain.
But again, that's not the bread and butter of NAC TV. That the local is the most important part of it. And talking about the LJI, they were able to produce 151 programs in the calendar year, totaling out almost 98 hours of local community programming. Now, where else are you going to get that? Quite honestly, you can't get that. You can't get that on the networks. You can't get that on CBC, CTV Global even right now.
Not a hope.
No.
Anyway, maybe we better talk about beef cattle.
All right.
You went to that meeting.
I did. Maybe that's the thing I went to as opposed to the NAC TV.
I think you're right. Are you a cowboy now?
Well, I'm getting the fur. I'm getting the tuft, to get ready for the winter season. So went and checked things out over at the Manitoba Beef Producers. They had one of their district meetings. It was actually the last district meeting of several they've held throughout the fall. It was held here in Neepawa. They talked about a few things of note. And it's interesting because I'm not part of that world. I don't consistently sort of pay attention to those things, to be honest with you. But one of the things that really caught my eye, and I think we'll follow back up in the future on, is their request to the RCMP in Manitoba to create what they call a livestock investigator. Now, if you're watching that show Yellowstone in any way, shape, or form, and apparently a lot of people are, they do got one of the characters for a year or two was a livestock investigator, essentially a cattle sheriff type thing. And that's along the same lines of what the Manitoba beef producers would like to see created here in Manitoba. Hopefully not as many shootouts. If you've watched Yellowstone, everything seems to be a shootout eventually. But hopefully it's a little calmer than that for whomever ends up being our livestock investigator here. And it's an interesting concept because when it comes to fraud, when it comes to theft and these types of things, they have to go right now through the RCMP just like everyone else. But many RCMP don't have the same knowledge and background for something, a specific genre such as this. And quite honestly, they're busy with other things like everyday thefts and all those other things. So their hope is to find someone that will be specific to that genre. Because they do have things like that, Ken, in Alberta and Saskatchewan already. So why not Manitoba?
Yeah, there's a large beef industry in Manitoba. We're down in cow numbers maybe by 20% from what we were 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, the cattle thefts, I think, this fall are going to go through the roof. If you look over the next page, Gladstone Auction Mart report, and it shows that 500-pound calves are selling for $4 and $5 a pound. Like a 400-pound calf is worth $2,000 now. Like a good young guy like you, Eoin, could go out in the pasture and just about catch a 400-pound calf and throw it in the truck.
Well, I don't know about that. I'll get one of the small ones and then just grow it from there. Yeah. But I am not a rustler. I have never been a cattle rustler. Never will be. So
you can blame the Irish for a lot of things, but not for cattle rustling, right?
Well, you'd need a lot more cattle.
Sheep stealing, maybe.
Oh,
no, that's Scottish. That's my background. Sorry. Anyway, no, the cattle industry is doing very well, and rightly so, because they've had some years where things were pretty tough.
Yep.
Certainly, if you go back to 2003 with the BSE, the cattle industry was almost decimated. And I was thankful at that time that I was no longer in the cattle business when we went through that. Now I wish I was, when calves are worth $4 a pound or $5 a pound. But anyway, locally, Matthew Atkinson, local guy, is the president of Manitoba Beef Producers Association. He does a column every so often. Occasionally we publish it in our Farmers Advocate, and we're proud of the work that Matthew and the association does for what is a very large portion of our agriculture industry in Manitoba.
That's right. You can find a little bit more about what happened at the Manitoba Beef Producers meeting in this week's edition of the Banner Press. You can find it anywhere in Neepawa or surrounding communities. You can get a physical copy, or if you can't find a physical copy, you can always find it on mywestman.ca. Every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, it goes live on mywestman.ca, and you can find it online. All right, let's shift over to an annual event that's going on in the near future that's probably going to go over huge, and that's going to be the Neepawa Rotary Club and their annual auction. The last couple years they've been doing it online, and now people are starting to get used to the change, the process, and the whole whatever on that. So it's really picking up some momentum. I had a chance to speak with Murray Newton, the treasurer for the Rotary Club, about it, and he shared some of the details about it. Expectation is they're going to have anywhere between 130 and 150 items this year. They're really excited about the variety of items as well that they're going to be having. Stay tuned. Keep an eye out on the Neepawa Banner Press, because we're going to be putting out a list of all those items once they're officially official. So keep an eye out on that, and then check out online. And Murray did want to sort of share one other thing he thought was very important. Some people still aren't used to the whole online auction portion of it, and he wanted to make sure there was one thing that was clarified, is that you can bid on something, and you only need to bid once if you do it right. And we cite this as an example in there. Let's say there's a $200 item you really want, and you're willing to pay up to that $200 for it. You don't have to keep going back onto the website and putting in an extra $10 bid, $10 bid, $10 bid, multiple times. What you can do is the first time is you set your maximum. Let's say $200 is as far as you want to go. And then it'll start the bidding at like $10. And it'll go up in increments. So if somebody else bids $20 for it, it won't immediately jump to $200 for you. It'll go up in that increment of $10. So it'll only go $30. So maybe you'll get it for a little bit less. If you do have any questions on that, always ask. You can always ask your grandchildren about it or your children about it. So they'll be able to walk you through the process there. Not that I'm saying that's an older generation that does it, because Murray was very adamant that there are younger people right now that are getting into it year over year, and they're very interested in being a part of it, which is great to hear.
Yeah. Sorry about the cough. I don't intentionally do that. There's a little personal wrinkle here. I wasn't until recently taking high blood pressure medication. Like, why would I have high blood pressure? The guy is, trim and fit as I am and as calm as I am. Why would I have high blood pressure?
Hi, how you doing? Owen Devereux here. I'm probably the reason for the high blood pressure. My bad.
Blood pressure pills, apparently, some of them cause coughing. I was really glad to hear that. Anyway, sorry about that.
Well, no worries. No worries there. If you want to learn a little bit more, obviously, you can pick up a copy of the paper and find out a little bit. Anyway. We're just coming up to near the end, so just very quickly going to run through one or two little things here. Neepawa Farmers recently had their home opener for the Tiger Hills Hockey League. They've played a few games. Didn't get the result they wanted this time against the Rivers Jets at home, but we got a picture and the full story. Not just Farmers as well. Obviously, we try to be a community paper, a regional paper, so I try and touch as well on the Minnedosa team, Gladstone's team, Carberry's team, and if you live in those communities, if you live in those areas, if you're at the games, maybe snap a picture or two, send it our way. We'll put anything in there from those games. We love the Tiger Hills Hockey League, think it's a great level of hockey, and always appreciate it. We got a minute or two left. Even though we don't got it on the list, Ken, I'm going to throw to you about your column this week. If you see on page 4, it's an expanded column. We took Tundra, our weekly cartoon, put it aside, because Ken had a lot of things he wanted to say and wanted to share this week about the significance of Remembrance Day and the meanings behind it. So,
well, I think this year, more than many years, we are reminded of the purpose of Remembrance Day with the Israeli-Hamas war, the Ukraine-Russian war going on. Plus, there's at least 10 other wars going on in the world right now. And I really, well, you can read it for yourself there, but I had a personal moment in a family gathering where I almost broke down and cried because the contrast between the happiness that was happening in my family's house with all the kids that were there and all the parents and having fun together and realizing that in a lot of places in the world there's people who can't have fun anymore and many have lost their lives. And we personally, what can we do about it except hope and pray and do whatever we can to make sure there's peace in our little world. Owen and I don't even fight anymore. And to do the best we can for our own people and for our world. Read about it, please, and your comments would be welcomed.
That's right. As always, we do appreciate your comments on anything we write up, whether you agree or whether you disagree on that. That's what democracy is about. That's what a free press is about. So we always appreciate that. And if you have any story ideas or suggestions, we definitely appreciate that. Try and hit as many of them as we can. And you can contact us either by phone at 476-3401, the number we can be reached at, or you can get to us by email at news@neepawabanner.com. Once again, news@neepawabanner.com. We try and hit as many of these things as we can. We're a small town paper, and we try and make sure to cover the small town community issues that are important to you and impact you on a daily basis. So that's pretty much it, I'd say, for this week's edition. As always, we appreciate your time. Good to have you in here this week, Ken.
Good to be here.
And once again, thank you, as always, for taking your time and spending it here with us on NAC TV and the story behind the stories. Have yourself a fantastic week.